All right, thank you. Going live in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We are live.
Should I wait for the webinar to connect? Okay. There it is. All right. Good evening and welcome to the December 12th, 2024 Rental Housing Committee regular meeting. The meeting is called to order at 7:01 p.m. And I'll proceed with roll call. All members are present with the exception of alternate Mark Balch and member Guadalupe Rosas, who are absent. So for the consent calendar, these items will be approved by one motion unless any member of the committee wishes to remove an item for discussion. The purpose of the consent calendar is for the committee to efficiently and quickly consider routine or administrative business items with one motion. Public comment will occur after the discussion. We invite you to submit a speaker card now if you would like to speak on this item during public comment. Would any member of the committee like to pull an item? All right. Seeing none, I now invite public comment. In-person public comments will be called to speak first. Any member of the public wishing to provide a virtual comment on this item, please click the raise hand button in Zoom or press *9 on your phone. Staff will display a countdown timer on the screen. We have one hand. Jim, would you like to speak on? Okay, we have no hands. So I'll bring the item back for committee action. A motion to approve the consent calendar should include reading the title of the agenda items 3.1 and 3.2. Member Cox?
I'm making a motion to approve the consent calendar as written, which includes the minutes for the November 14th, 2024 RHC meeting. 3.2, notification of minor clarification of CSFRA regulations, Chapter 13, utilities. That's it.
All right. Motion was made by Committee Member Cox and seconded by Vice Chair Ma. Motion on the floor is to approve the full consent calendar. We can now vote. All right, motion passes unanimously. We will now open the meeting for oral communication from the public. This portion of the meeting is reserved for persons wishing to address the committee on any matter not on the agenda. Speakers are allowed to speak on any topic for up to 3 minutes during this section. State law prohibits the committee from acting on non-agenda items. Would any member of the public like to provide comment on non-agenda items? If you'd like to speak on this item in person, please submit a speaker card to city staff now. In-person public comments will be called to speak first. Any member of the public wishing to provide a virtual comment on this item, please click the raised hand button in Zoom or press *9 on your phone. Staff will display a countdown timer on the screen. Okay. So we can now move on to the appeal hearing. Karen, should I start, or would you like to?
Well, why don't you let me start? So what you have before you tonight is an appeal hearing on a petition. We received notice that the appellant respondent is ill, and they are requesting a continuance of the hearing to your next meeting. We don't have specific procedures for a continuance for an appeal hearing. We do have procedures for postponement of a hearing before a hearing officer, and illness is one justified cause for the hearing officer to postpone the hearing. And so given the illness and the fact that the appellant respondent is not able to present their case, we would recommend that you continue this to your January meeting, but you may want to allow the petitioner to speak on this issue before you take any action.
Okay. So in terms of the flow, we would not have the presentation about the item first before getting the. Okay.
We would not go through the staff presentation. We would not go through the appeal hearing process of each party having their time. We would not consider, we would just postpone the entire item to the January meeting.
But we can begin with comment from.
Yes, I think you need to take both public comment and comment from the petitioner, because the petitioner, I believe, is present. And you need to hear their position on a continuance of this matter. And then you need to consider whether to continue it or move forward with the hearing.
All right. So. No, okay.
No, she just answered my question.
All right. So I'll start with the script and get to public comment, and then the respondent tenant. Okay. We'll move to agenda item 5.1, appeal of hearing officer's decision regarding petitions number C-2324-0057 and C-2324-0058. The Rental Housing Committee, in hearing the appeal, is acting in a quasi-judicial fashion and will conduct the hearing in accordance with those standards. Staff will detail the appeal hearing process in the presentation if we don't continue it. Before we get started, RHC members are required to disclose any communications they have had with any of the parties to the petition or the party's representatives and the substance of those communications since the date the petition was filed. The decision of the RHC is to be based on the record presented to the hearing officer. Information disclosed to any RHC member that is not part of the record is not to be considered in the hearing. Do any RHC members have ex parte communications that need to be disclosed? All right, seeing none.
And before we continue, I do want to just mention we are having translations this evening. So if we can speak a little bit slowly so they have time to translate. Thank you.
I can try. Okay. Are there members of the public who are not parties to the petition who would like to speak? In-person public comments will be called to speak first. Any member of the public wishing to provide a virtual comment on this item, please click the raise hand button in Zoom or press *9 on your phone. Staff will display a countdown timer on the screen. All right. So seeing no public comment, would the appellant, or the petitioner, the respondent tenant and original petitioner like to comment on continuing the continuing of the item?
Ms. Garcia?
So 6 minutes to allow for translation. Welcome.
Sorry, do I need to put a timer on, Karen?
Yeah, can you put 6 minutes?
Yeah.
So double the typical.
Right, just give me one moment.
Buenas noches. Yo no quiero aplazar más esta corte porque relacionado al 251, a esta propiedad, hoy van 13 cortes que he tenido y mi salud no está bien. Necesito medicinas para poder dormir y mis nervios no están bien. Yo lo que quiero hacer no es tanto el dinero, lo que yo quiero es darle al Señor una lección de vida, porque Él no estaba haciendo las cosas bien conmigo ni con nadie de los renteros ahí.
Good evening. I do not wish to postpone the hearing or the appeal hearing. I've already been through 3 of these hearings, and my health is not well. I need to take meds, and my nerves are really bad from going through all of this. The situation is that I don't really care about the money. I just really care about, improving the quality of life where I live.
Yo tuve bastantes situaciones con mi vecino en esa propiedad y le pedía ayuda al dueño y él no me quería dar ayuda. Lo que hacía era empeoraba las cosas. Yo estaba sufriendo de acoso y también me ponchaban mis llantas frecuentemente y rayaban mi carro. Y el dueño, en vez de apoyarme, me hizo remover las cámaras. Y yo tenía una abogada que me estaba ayudando, pero ella falleció. Y entonces todas estas situaciones me tienen deprimida. Y quiero terminar con esto pronto por cuestiones de salud.
I've had more than enough patience with my neighbor, and I've asked for help from the landlord many times, and they refused to help me. I've been constantly being harassed by my neighbor, and the neighbor has scratched my car, and instead of helping me, the landlord forced me to remove the cameras that I had so that I could capture proof of this activity. I did have a lawyer that was helping me, but my lawyer has passed away recently, and I just want to finish this whole situation and get it over with because it's really having a bad impact on my health.
Tengo una orden de restricción para 3 años con el vecino y quiero cerrar la puerta ya de esta situación porque también la medicina que estoy tomando, el efecto secundario me hace temblar demasiado y yo no quiero estar bajo un tratamiento.
I have a harassment restraining order that I filed against my neighbor. And I just want to I want to close the door on this problem that I'm having, especially due to the fact that the meds that I'm taking make me shake uncontrollably, as it's a secondhand effect from the medication I'm taking, and it's really affecting my health.
Yo no lo estoy haciendo esto tanto por dinero. Yo lo estoy haciendo para que mi comunidad latina, todos los inmigrantes sepan de que hay una ayuda. Lo estoy haciendo también para darle al Señor una lección de vida. Y por eso me gustaría que consideraran, por favor, mi salud. Yo soy mamá soltera y hago lo mejor de mí. Y consideraran que yo no quiero aplazar esto. Yo quiero que esta noche terminemos esto.
I'm not doing this for the money. I'm doing it for the Latin American community, and so that all the immigrants in my community know that there is a way that they can get help. And I really hope that you consider my health and my health issues. I'm a single mother, and this is all really taking a toll on me, and I really would rather not prolong this situation anymore, and I ask you not to grant the postponement. I would really rather just get this over with tonight.
Yo viví por 15 años en la propiedad de este señor. Cuando yo llegué ahí, él me entregó el lugar sucio. Yo tuve que pagar por limpieza de carpeta y pulir el piso de cocina. Pero el Señor vino y agarró todos los recibos que yo pagué y yo viví 15 años en su propiedad y yo cuidaba esa propiedad con mucho amor. Ahora el Señor quiere que yo pague cosas, por ejemplo, pintura y cosas así.
Thank you.
I've lived in this apartment for 15 years, and when I first moved in, I moved into a filthy apartment, and I had to pay to have it cleaned myself. I had to pay to have the kitchen floor cleaned. I had to pay to have the carpets cleaned. I kept all of the receipts and was never paid back by the landlord. I've lived in this apartment for 15 years, and I've taken care of it with a lot of love.
Thank you. Now would be the time for the committee to. Oh, Pamela? So,
Is there a question or?
so one of the landlord is available on Zoom. Yeah. Oh, she would like to, should we hear from?
Yes,
Yeah.
if she would like to.
If the appellant landlord would like to raise their hand to ask for continuance. All right, can we please promote?
You can go ahead and unmute yourself, Pam.
All right, so also 6 minutes to allow for translation.
I believe I'm muted.
I think you can do simultaneous
Yeah, so we
translation,
do
so 3
Okay,
minutes.
So 3 minutes. Just hold on, we can hear it. All right, we can hear you, Pam.
Okay. My husband is very ill, so he cannot come. My only comment is that the tenant no longer lives there and hasn't since I believe it's September. I'm not up on all the facts. This would be my husband who would have normally handled this, so I don't have those in front of me. But the tenant no longer lives there, so the tenant is no longer having an issue with any tenant. We did act when the restraining order was submitted, and all of the other items have been heard. My husband wrote a respondent. Section that I saw was attached to your minutes, so if you have reviewed that, I don't have anything else to add, except that the former tenant, is not there. So any statement to continuing is not acceptable. We let her out of the lease early.
So you're saying you don't want a continuance?
Well, I would rather my husband be answered this because I am very uncomfortable. The tenant has repeatedly said not to talk to her.
Okay, but regarding this hearing tonight.
Pardon?
Regarding this hearing, the appeal hearing.
I would like to request it be continued.
All right, thank you. Okay, so now the committee can deliberate on whether or not we want to proceed with the hearing or continue it to a future meeting. Member Cox?
Yeah, just a question for staff here. So in the cases where, you had a hearing officer have a session with people and someone couldn't come because they were ill, I mean, what was the procedure? I mean, did you just take them on faith on that, or?
So you have regulations on this matter that a party to a petition can request a postponement and that the hearing officer will consider it. They are supposed to request the postponement at least 7 days before the hearing, but in an emergency situation, obviously they can request it with a shorter time frame. There is a request for documentation, but the grounds for postponement include illness, travel out of the area. I don't really know what documentation you could get at this point. And given that the appellant respondent is saying that the primary appellant respondent cannot attend and present their case, I think it's a due process issue if we proceed with the hearing without them.
Okay, thank you.
Member Cox.
Yes, okay, so having heard that and heard the staff recommendation, I'm going to make a motion that we continue this. I know that, you know, sometimes they say the wheels of justice, you know, they work slowly. Oh. And, but I think that in the interest of justice, it's necessary for us to be able to hear both sides. So since the appellant cannot be here due to illness, I think with prudence, it makes sense to just take their word for that and reschedule at the earliest possible moment where both sides could be heard.
All right, thank you. Do we have a second for the motion? No. All right. Motion to continue made by Member Cox, seconded by Member Keating. As we can discuss it. Vice Chair?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Will be voting in favor of the motion. This is just a common courtesy as part of the appeal hearings, is that we should be able to hear from both sides. This will be the same if the tenant was suddenly sick on the day of the appeal. This will be the same if the landlord was sick on the day of the appeal. So therefore, I would support the motion.
Thank you. Member Keating?
I'd just like to say that I'm sure I join many members of our committee and looking forward to hearing this appeal and deciding it. And it seems, based on our legal counsel comments, that our only way to truly get this done is to postpone it so that both parties can speak.
All right, thank you. Myself in there. Similar to my fellow committee members, I think that health is important, and I do apologize that this is going to take longer, because I do think that, you know, like, being sick is not easy, but that's what we're accounting for tonight. You don't schedule illness 7 days in advance. You can't account for that. So I'm in favor of continuing this until we can hear the full process from everyone involved to be able to make the best decision as a body. So I'll also be supporting this. And time to vote. No. Hit recuse. Or abstain. All right, motion passes. 4 yeas, 1 abstain. So this item will be continued to a future meeting where both members can participate, or both people can participate, so we can move on to item 6, where Member Rosas and I have an announcement.
So due to the nature of this next item, I will be recusing myself.
I will also be recusing due to an interest in my mobile home and space rent. So, Vice Chair, good luck.
All right, we will now move on to agenda item 6.1, potential modifications to allowed rent increases in the mobile home rent stabilization ordinance, housing element program 3.2. Public comment will occur after the presentation item and committee questions. We invite you to submit a speaker card now if you know you would like to speak on this item during public comment. We will begin with a presentation from staff.
Thank you, and good evening, committee members. Thank you for taking the time to hear this item. I'm Wayne Chen, I'm the Housing Director, and I'm joined here with Ankie van Dersen, Rent Stabilization Manager. This item is regarding potential modifications to allowed rent increases in the Mobile Home Rent Stabilization Ordinance and is part of our adopted housing element. Before we go into the specifics of the housing element, we wanted to provide a brief background of how the Mobile Home Rent Stabilization Ordinance came to be. So as you, I think, know, Measure V, which is the Community Stabilization and Fair Rent Act, was passed in 2016, and the Rental Housing Committee made a determination that it did not cover mobile homes. And that decision, which was passed by resolution, was upheld by the courts. As such, the City Council added evaluating a potential ordinance to its strategic priorities for the 2019-2021 period. And through that process, directed staff to develop a standalone mobile home rent stabilization ordinance, MHRSO, that would mirror the CSFRA protections, but with some necessary modifications to address the unique specific issues to mobile home park, including being mindful of the state mobile home residency law provisions and other factors. The ordinance was adopted in September of 2021, and it went into effect 30 days later. The purpose of the ordinance is stated here, and there's two parts. One is to protect mobile home residents from unreasonable rent increases, while also balancing the ability for park owners and mobile home landlords to receive a fair return. The ordinance has a few key elements. It covers situations where there is a owner of a mobile home and they rent a space in the mobile home park. And so that covers the space rent. It also covers the situations where there is a tenant renting a mobile home from a mobile home owner. It includes an annual general adjustment, the annual allowable rent increase, which is 100% CPI-U, which is known as this all items index. That's mirrored after the CSFRA. It's in the MHRSO ordinance. And it also mirrors the CSFRA in terms of having a 2% floor, which provides some downside protection for park owners, and a ceiling of 5% to protect upside protection for residents. There are other elements that impact rent. For example, capital improvement pass-throughs is a mechanism that's available. There's also just a petition process to sort of challenge, to be able to file challenges to rent. So there's upward and downward rent petition process. And the RHC is really tasked to oversee this implementation, which was passed by the city, but it's implemented by the Rental Housing Committee. So now turning to the housing element and the task at hand, the state certified housing element that the city has for this period includes Program 3.2. It's a comprehensive displacement response strategy. One of the items is to evaluate potential amendments to rent increases to this ordinance. Studying updates to this ordinance has a deadline of March 31st of 2025. And there's another goal that is identified in the housing element, which is to strive to preserve affordable housing opportunities, such as those in CSFR units and mobile homes. So turning to a little bit of the data and a little bit more background in terms of the intention of this housing element item, as we understand it, is taking a look at the history of the CPI and how it has led to the annual general adjustment. One note is that when the ordinance was passed in 2021, the first time that an AGA was applied was in 2022. And so the very first time that happened was right out of the gate during the pandemic. The AGA hit the ceiling. And so that's what folks, residents in mobile homes experienced. But if we look further back to the beginning of the CSFRA for context, the start of that had lower inflation rates and therefore lower AGAs. In 2021, there was a floor in effect where the CPI was lower than the AGA, than the 2% floor. So the floor came into effect in 2021. The ceiling came into effect in 2022 and 2023. As we look at the housing element, one of the key items that came up during the development of the housing element was that the experience and the back-to-back experiences of these ceilings itself could create a hardship for residents. And the focus there was really taking a look at these annual general adjustment provisions. So as part of our review, we took a look at what comparable jurisdictions are doing, identifying the unique characteristics of mobile homes and residents, and then also stakeholder input. In terms of the comparable jurisdictions, we did as much of a comprehensive review as possible during the time that we had, and taking a look at 36 comparable jurisdictions, covering about 340 mobile home parks, about 45,000 mobile home spaces. One thing to note is that there isn't a state level provision requiring what is allowed or not allowed under for rent stabilization for mobile homes. These are established pretty much locally. And as we did the comparison, it was clear that there were a wide range of AGAs, floors, ceilings, percentages, and the combinations thereof. And aside from these, other jurisdictions have different provisions, whether it's how they structure their petitions and capital improvements, et cetera. But the focus here was really about the AGA floor and ceiling. Just a summary of the analysis, then we'll go through some of the specifics, is that regarding the AGA, Mountain View is within the range of the cities, but it is on the top end of the range. We'll see that in a moment in more detail. Regarding the floor, Mountain View with the 2% floor is mid-range, and with the ceiling, Mountain View is on the lower end of the range. So here you see the range, essentially between 50% CPI and 100% CPI, and the distribution between the jurisdictions and the number of mobile homes covered in those jurisdictions. Just highlighting here, this is where Mountain View is at, and about 29% of the jurisdictions use this. It covers about 12% of the mobile homes. And in the other jurisdictions covering more of the mobile home spaces, you can see they do go down lower. Regarding the range of floors, there are 86% of the jurisdictions with no floor, covering 65% of the mobile homes, which is the majority. And then it goes up to 3.5%, but that's a much smaller amount. And just in terms of the floor percentage, that's Mountain View highlighted in red, sort of in the middle of the range. In terms of the range of ceilings, it goes from a 3% ceiling all the way to having no ceiling at all. And in fact, there are 19% of mobile home spaces that don't have any ceiling, so sort of that upside protection for tenants. Mountain View is here, 5%, sort of on the lower end of the range. There are 8 jurisdictions with a 5% ceiling, covering about 12% of mobile homes. We did want to flag the unique characteristics that may be present in mobile homes and mobile home residents. This information is from the survey that was done when the city was going through the development and evaluation of the MHRSO. Basically, the survey found that there is a significant portion of residents in mobile home parks who are seniors with limited or fixed income situations, and then a rather high amount, or 30% of these seniors are also single-person households as well. And 16% of mobile homes are occupied residents that do not own but rent their mobile homes. So most of the mobile home residents are owners, but there is a percentage of those who are renting the units as well. And then 2 of the mobile home parks have a high proportion of seniors. The ordinance itself reflects that there are unique characteristics for parks and mobile home residents, and so we did want to note that. And so it may be that the provisions under the MHRSO, there may be some special considerations as opposed to the CSFRA, although the beginnings of the MHRSO was to mirror the CSFRA. Regarding stakeholder input for the residents, there were 2 stakeholder meetings, one virtual, one online, and then there was one for park owners that was held virtually. And it reflects some of the findings through the survey that there are some unique characteristics with mobile home residents, again, seniors, those on fixed income, et cetera. That the rent increases over the last 3 years have been unsustainable when you look at it from a compounded perspective. And the situation is, if the rents are too high and many of the mobile home residents are owners, it's not an easy thing to just move to another place or to move the unit. And so a lot of the comments were around the increases, certainly. We also did receive input that, however, rent increases around 3% is kind of a historical norm, and that's sort of something that folks may have come to expect. We did get a comment and input that a combination of a 60% CPI with a ceiling of 3% and no floor would provide the adequate protections. And then the cost of operating a park would be lower than a rental apartment building. So the park owners had various input as well, which one of the input was that Mountain View is in the range that you've seen. Maybe it's on the high end, but it's still within the range, so that the intention of the housing element has already been met with the current combination. Although there have been a couple years or a few years of high inflation, that wasn't really the norm, and the ceiling already provided that protection. And some jurisdictions may have a lower AJ set during the pandemic, but through a petition process, the actual resulting upward adjustments may have been even greater than the AGA, even though the lower AGA was meant to provide some protection for tenants. It was identified that the Mountain View's fees for MHRSO are higher than other jurisdictions, which lowers the revenue, and that was one thing for them that we should consider. And lowering the AGA, the notion is that it could cause the price of mobile homes to go up, making them less affordable. And park owners may be forced to file a petition just to sort of recover their costs and be able to achieve this maintenance of net operating income, which could actually result in even higher rent increases. So in terms of the options, the pieces that we considered were multi-pronged. We were trying to keep in mind the purpose of the MHRSO, protecting residents while allowing park owners to achieve a fair return. We looked at the wording and the intention of the housing element direction. We looked at comparable jurisdictions, the unique characteristics, and feedback from stakeholders. And primarily through the overall summary of the charts, the recommendation is to consider lowering the AGA from 100% CPI to 75% CPI with no changes in the floor or ceiling. And the alternatives would be to have a different recommendation that the RHC might provide to the City Council, or recommending no change to the current combination. In terms of next steps, we are scheduled to hold an item with the City Council January the 28th. That's the first business item for City Council. And if Council directs staff to amend the allowable rent increases, the intention is to bring ordinance amendments forward in March to complete it prior to the March 31st deadline. So with that concludes our presentation, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Now we move on to questions from committee members. Do we have any questions from committee members? Going once. All right, Member Cox.
Yeah, sorry. This is slow in turning over for me to hit the button. There we go. All right. Yeah, I just have one question for staff. Originally when I had been thinking about this, my model of how a mobile home park works is that, the mobile home park owner provides space and hookups. But I mean, other than, and I want to thank you for pointing out that it also includes maintenance of the common area and things like that. But I mean, one issue that came up in the letters that we received was the idea of, there are mobile homes that don't have individual submetering on the units. And if that's the case, then the utility costs are, I would guess, would be then part of the rent, and so that becomes a cost also to the landlord. But I guess I'd like a little bit more clarification on that. Have I got that right, or do I not have all the details right?
Yeah, so in that respect, the MHRSO is a little different than the CSFRA, where we just went through the whole exercise that utilities were part of rent. In the MHRSO, that is not the case, and that is because the MRL, the statewide mobile home law, says that utilities are being paid separately by the mobile home residents.
So could the mobile home park owners be using something equivalent to RUBS?
Yeah.
And that's perfectly okay then, right?
That is not forbidden, correct?
Okay. All right, thank you. That's what I wanted to know.
All right, any other questions from committee members? Member Keating?
So for our specific mobile homes here in Mountain View, do we know which ones have individual metering and which don't?
I do not know that, but that should be easily retrievable, I think.
All right. Since there are no more questions, I now invite public comments. In-person public comments will be called to speak first. And any member of the public wishing to provide virtual comments on this item, please click the raise hand button in Zoom or press *9 on your phone. Staff will display a countdown timer on the screen. Andrea?
Thank you. I'll ask Ms. Cunningham.
Hello. This is my first time here. Is this in the right? Closer? Better? Okay. I'm Sarah Cunningham. I'm here with Hometown America. We thank you for taking the time, all of you on the committee, to review this and to give us opportunity to speak. We did submit a letter earlier this week, and I'm just going to basically kind of go over the highlights of that and touch base on why this is an important issue to us. So the current MHRSO aligns with comparable jurisdictions. As noted in the city's own analysis, the MHRSO's current provisions with the 100% CPI annual general adjustment, AGA, a 2% floor and a 5% ceiling, as you saw on the earlier slides, fall within the range of rent stabilization measures adopted by comparable jurisdictions, meeting the goal set out in the city's housing element to study amendments to the mobile home rent stabilization ordinance, MHRSO, such that allowed rent increases are consistent with or less than comparable jurisdictions. With rent control for mobile home parks, while it is true that 70% of jurisdictions have a lower AGA, the data also shows that Mountain View's ceiling is among the lowest in the region, providing significant tenant protection. The current AGA structure has effectively balanced the needs of residents and park owners. Residents have benefited from stable, predictable rents, while park owners have maintained the ability to cover rising operational costs such as insurance, utilities, materials, labor, all things that we use to maintain our communities. Altering this balance by reducing the AGA to 75% of CPI would impose additional financial strain on park owners, jeopardizing our ability to maintain and invest in our communities. The residents have fully benefited from the current structure. The MHRSO has delivered tangible benefits to residents since its implementation. Mobile home residents in Mountain View have experienced, again, stable and affordable rents, even during periods of high inflation. Importantly, the current system has helped preserve housing stability and affordability. It's been evidenced in recent years as the reasonable annual rent increases averaging 3.5% since 2021, which is lower than Social Security cost of living adjustment at 4.7, and the San Francisco CPIU at 3.6. Preservation of home equity while remaining a critical source of affordable housing. The resale value of mobile homes in Mountain View averaged $262,000 over the last 24 months, compared to the median single-family home sales price of $1.9 million. Lowering rent increases further could drive up home prices, make ownership less accessible to prospective buyers, and increase financing costs. Additionally, the communities have experienced almost entirely full occupancy across their mobile home communities, and that allows for a strong demand from prospective buyers, and that benefits the homeowners. Lowering the AGA could undermine housing stability.
That's time. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next speaker would be Barbara Davis. Barbara Davis.
Hi. I forgot my reading glasses, so sorry. My name is Barbara Davis, and I live at Santiago Villa. I've lived there for almost 9 years. I do pay separate water, sewer, electric, gas, separate from my rent. My space rent is $2,271.64. And if I receive year after year increases of 5%, I'll lose my home. I'm in my 60s. I'm a legal secretary and I work in Mountain View. This is my hometown. With all due respect, that the previous speakers really just kind of threw me off, because even if I did try to sell my house with my high space rent at $2,271, the sale price of my house is going to go down because of that. So there's no way that that's going to increase anything for me. I want to stay in my home, but I'm not going to be able to if there's so many increases year after year. And unfortunately, my park owner is very greedy. I'm one of the persons that last year when my space rent, my second 5% space rent, I went to the park office to pay my rent. And I said, hey, I've been a good tenant. I don't have any complaints. I'm paid every single year. I pay my rent on time. And he told me, that's what you get for fighting for rent control. He said that to my face because he's seen me in prior city council meetings. I also want to say that we've been talking about this issue since 2016, 2017. And I've been fighting. We all have, for some kind of protections. Do you not care about mobile home people? Are we not worthy of your view? We need help. We really need help. I can't stress that enough. And when are you going to put people over profits? It's just incredulous to me that we're still talking about this issue and nothing's been resolved. It has been resolved, the 5%, but it's still too high. 5% of 2271 year after year? I'm in my 60s. Where am I going to go? I volunteer for Life Moves. I volunteer for CSA. I volunteer for all of the things in Mountain View. So if I become homeless, I'll know where to go to get help. And I'm not leaving Mountain View, even if I have to live in an RV. I don't want to live in an RV. I want to live in my home. I want to be a citizen of Mountain View, but I want protections. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is on Zoom, B. Hansen. You can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi. I've already sent in a lengthy memo explaining why the Mountain View Alliance opposes this.
Sorry, Ms. Hansen, you're a little muffled. If you can try to speak more directly into the microphone.
I've already sent in a lengthy memo explaining why the Alliance opposes the city staff's recommendation for the MHRSO amendment. So I don't want to belabor that. But now that we have some more information about why the park owners' opposition to the recommendation, and any amendment to MHRSO does keep owners from getting a fair return on their investment, they can file a petition with RHC to get an upward adjustment in rent. After opposition from park owners delayed our ordinance and prevented us from getting protections for many years, we have no reason to trust them. If they can make a compelling case that they need an upward adjustment in rent and the rental housing allows it, the Mountain View Mobile Home Alliance will support that decision. I yield my time.
Thank you. The next speaker is a telephone number ending in 023. You can dial *6 to unmute.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. My name's Bonnie. I've lived in the Moore Park mobile homes for almost 26 years. I'm a 77-year-old senior just this year. So things are getting tougher every year. On a fixed income, and these recent modified proposed rent increases by RHC are not feasible. Over time, it would compound to a rent that is absurdly high and would result in displacement for myself. It is important that I continue to live in the Bay Area and stay in my home. As my mother, she's getting on years, is in a skilled nursing facility nearby in Sunnyvale. I'd like to add that for those who are the seniors and are collecting Social Security, we're only getting 2.5 cost of living increase for 2025. That doesn't even cover food. Now we're talking rent as well as utilities. So I'm going to make this short. I just am pleading, I suppose, to adopt the previous Mountain View Mobile Home Association's proposal and preserve this important affordable housing in Mountain View. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker's telephone number is ending in 872. You can dial *6 to unmute.
Yeah, hello. Can you hear me?
We can.
Yeah, is it clear?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, this is Chris. There's 4 other people on the line that are willing to cede their time to me so I can take the time and convey all the important things that the mobile home residents are experiencing right now. So can you give me the 10 minutes? Although I don't think I'm going to need 10 minutes.
Yes, thank you. Can I confirm that Anna Marie Morales and Susan Morales are on the line? Can you raise your hand? I don't see them listed. Maybe they're under another name. Oh, there she is.
No,
Anna just raised her.
Yeah,
Anna just raised her hand.
Yep, I see her there. Let me just 1 second ask Anna. Anna, can you unmute yourself? Is your mother on the line with you?
Yes.
Does she need to confirm? Can she confirm that she's there?
Yes.
Is that Susan?
That was my mom.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
I thought I was told that I would be able to verbally just raise my hand.
I'm just confirming because I believe there's 2 of you under one name. I just want to make sure that both of you are on the line. Thank you for that. All right, and Chris, you should be able to unmute yourself, and I have 10 minutes on the screen.
So let me know when I can begin.
You can begin.
Yeah, hi RHC. First of all, I want to thank Jim Schwartz, Joan Brodowski, Anna Marie Morales, and Susan Morales for ceding their time and joining me in this important commentary and feedback. I'm here speaking tonight on behalf of myself and all of my mobile home neighbors. First, some critical background. I'm a senior, and I've been renting my mobile home in Mountain View for the last 18 years. When I tell people I live in a home with rent control, they ask me, why is your rent so high if you have rent control? Why are your rent increases so high every year if you have rent control? Why are you paying market or above market rates for your home that you've lived in for 18 years if you have rent control? You think of places like New York City that have rent control, and folks' rents are modest, increases are sustainable, and rents are well below market rates. Unfortunately, that's not the way it is in Mountain View. The simple fact is the current mobile home ordinance is not working, and staff's recommendation on fixing it falls woefully short. Rents remain too high, rent increases are not sustainable, and rents are at or even well above market rates. The whole point of the ordinance is to keep folks in their homes. Yet in the last 2 months, 2 families in my park were forced to leave because they couldn't afford their rent increases. So all of us are proposing an ordinance that allows rent increases of 60% of CPI or 3%, whichever is lower, with no floor. We're calling this 360-0 instead of the current 5-100-2 regime currently in place. Did you know that Antioch, Richmond, Concord, Pittsburgh, Delano, Santa Ana, Inglewood, Beverly Hills, and Concord, and other cities all have 360-0 model that we're recommending? Since I have limited time, let me refute some of staff's claims surrounding their recommendation for the cap, the AGA, and the floor. And I'll also refute, in doing this, Hometown of America's claims. First of all, the cap ceiling. Staff's entire analysis and basis for keeping the cap at 5% is based on comparable jurisdictions. The fact of the matter is there is no comparable jurisdiction to a city like Mountain View that has the highest rents in the country. An owner's current space rent of $2,100 balloons to almost $5,600 in 20 years at 5%. A renter's current home rent of $4,000, and we have people paying that, balloons to almost $11,000 in 20 years at 5%. I'm a senior, as are many of my neighbors, and my Social Security increase this year did not cover my rent increase. And my neighbors are not seeing 5% take-home wage increases either. Part of the problem, self-inflicted by this committee, stems from the fact that our base rents were set 6 years after CSFRA base rents. So we're already starting from an exceptionally high base rent. So it's really important that we get that 3% cap. I ask all of you, ask yourselves, how is it fair that park owners have their largest expense, property taxes, capped at 2%, while residents have their highest expense, rent, capped at 5%? And in addition to property tax caps, park owners receive numerous other tax benefits that are not available to renters. And finally, one key point to remember on this issue, we're talking about percentage caps here, not dollar caps. Percentage caps impose real, progressive. Adopt an AGA that mimics almost 1 in 3 mobile homes in California, which is 60% or less. The current AGA of 100% is just not working. And finally, the floor is just not working. And finally, the floor. The discussion around the floor and justification for it is the most insidious. No matter what type of convoluted logic one wants to employ, there's simply zero justification for having a floor. So we need to eliminate it. 85% of jurisdictions in staff's analysis have no floor. 85%. I ask each member of the RHC and staff to identify an industry, any industry in the country, that is guaranteed a 2% increase in revenues, irrespective of market conditions. Market conditions like a Great Depression, a weak rental market, high vacancy rates, a Silicon Valley bust, World War III, a global pandemic, Armageddon. Any of these could happen in the next 20 years, but with the current ordinance, it doesn't matter. Landlords can still raise rents in Mountain View 2%. And they've told us to our face in no uncertain terms that that's exactly what they plan to do. No wonder the park owners love this business model. So in summary, please eliminate the floor. In closing, we ask RHC, please do not accept staff's recommendation. It falls short of our needs. Change the AGA to 60% of CPI, change the cap to 3%, and please eliminate the floor. And you know what? With a 360-0 regime, the park owners will do just fine. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Molly C. If you can unmute yourself.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can.
Great, thank you. Hi, my name is Molly, and I've lived in Moore Park Mobile Homes for almost 10 years now. And first, I just wanted to address a question from, I think, the RHC members. Yes, all mobile homes in Mountain View are individually metered. We pay our own utilities. That is not something that the park owners pay. And then in terms of the question on hand, I think this is really, really simple. You just kind of have to ask yourself one question. Should the landlords have better protections than the mobile home residents? And I think the answer is no. If you want to say we should have equal protections, then great. You know, we pay mortgage just like they do. We pay maintenance and repairs just like they do. You know, my gas line recently leaked and it was $7,000 to fix it. Like it is ridiculous. We have to pay those costs ourselves, not like an apartment landlord that has to pay that. The landlord, we have to pay that ourselves. We also pay insurance on our homes. They pay insurance as well. So really the only thing that's different between a mobile home resident and a landlord is they pay property taxes and we pay space rent. And their property taxes, as others have mentioned, have a floor of 0% and a ceiling of 2%. So if you want mobile home residents to have equal protections to landlords, at least, it's the very least we can do, then our floor should be 0 and our ceiling should be 2%. And I yield my time. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Saulo. You can unmute yourself.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Great, thank you. My name is Saulo and I'm with WMA. We work with mobile home community owners and managers throughout California. We do education, training, advocacy, etc. I'm here today to urge you to listen closely to the words that have been communicated to you by the housing providers in your community. These community managers have sent letters to you giving you detailed explanations for why the current ordinance, as it's written, is working well and achieving the primary goals of protecting residents while still allowing community owners and managers to sustain the rising costs of maintaining and operating these parks. Our association does work all throughout the state, so allow me to inform you that the areas in California that have chosen to limit a community manager's ability to raise rents below allowable CPI are the areas in which community investment has dried up, in which the relationship between community owners, residents, and local government has severely deteriorated. It's not for nothing. Just think about the implication of telling a business, any business, that they're not allowed by law to keep up with the cost of inflation. You wouldn't tell your grocer that he can't raise the price of milk to keep up with inflation. It's the exact same thing. It's an outright assault on the basic survival of any business, much less a housing provider who must, by law, ensure that the properties and infrastructure are safe for public use. It's simply wrong to imply, like many have done tonight, that costs for community owners and managers are not going up, or that park owners can simply incur these rising costs without raising rents. In fact, their costs are going up by way more than CPI, as any of these housing providers can tell you. As any business owner or economist can tell you, a business that cannot keep up with the cost of inflation is a business that is going to fail. It's not a matter of if, but when. I urge you to communicate closely with your housing providers and listen to their pleas when they tell you their basic reality. They provide important housing in this community, and they are telling you that they could not continue to operate at the same level if you move in this direction. We urge you again not to attempt to fix something that's not broken. This ordinance works. So many ordinances in the state do not work, but this one does. If you stick to step, you will break it, so we ask you just simply not to. Thanks again for your time.
Thank you. And our final speaker is Charlene. You can unmute yourself. Charlene?
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, actually, I think you might have the names mixed up. This is Frank Kalsick.
Oh, okay. Yep. Sorry, you're logged in under a different name. I'll go ahead and mark you down as Frank.
Okay. My apologies for that. Good evening, commissioners. My name is Frank Kalsick, and I'm the managing partner of Sunset Estates. I apologize for not being able to be at tonight's meeting in person, but thank you for the opportunity to call in with some comments. First of all, I appreciate the community's concern regarding economic displacement. As a member myself of the community, it's something that we do read about in the papers and see on a firsthand basis. And so things that can be done to address that specifically are good. That stated, inflation, which is the topic of the conversation here, is a result of a national monetary policy. It's not something created by landlords to increase rent. Landlords face the same challenges as everyone else with these rising costs that we've experienced during the pandemic's peak. The Mobile Home Rent Stabilization Ordinance already provides for tight controls over mobile home space rent. In its short existence, it has provided residents with the rent freeze in 2021 and twice has capped the annual adjustment to residents below inflation, relying upon community owners to underwrite the expenses above this cap. Reducing the AGA would place further strain on our budgets. We take pride in our communities, and I want to keep them relevant. Reducing the AGA sends the message to community owners that cheap rent is all that matters. I'd like to continue to believe that mobile home residents do value their community's environment and understand that it takes money to keep it that way. We ask the committee to send a message to the City Council that while displacement is a concern, the ordinance that the City Council passed just a few years ago is consistent with or less than other ordinances within the region and should not be altered. Addressing displacement due to economic situation is best done on an individual basis, in my experience, and targeted to the individual's needs and resources. The proposal before you this evening won't help with economic displacement. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We have no further speakers.
Thank you. Next, we will go into committee deliberations and feedback. Does any member of the committee would like to give discussion and or feedback? Committee Member Cox? You're still on from last time unless you want to remove.
I'm willing to let somebody else speak first if they choose so.
I have a good first question. So as we go through this, do we want to limit our feedback, or do we want to have general comments first and then talk about specific things? Do we want some structure?
I guess that is a question for staff. Since this is marked as no motion is requested, how would you like our feedback to be collated?
think we do want a motion.
Okay,
what
so
your
you do want a
recommendation
motion.
is for the city council.
Okay, so that's fine. Member Keating, what did you say about that?
So I think I would like to suggest that the committee members give general comments and then that we break it up into the different components.
Sure, that's fine.
So I'm happy to begin with some general comments. I would never expect landlords to support regulation. I mean, in any industry, those who are providing the service prefer not to be regulated generally. And so I didn't pay such close attention to the city council deliberations on passing the MHRSO, but I'm sure that at that time landlords were saying this is a bad idea, and now that we're saying, gee, do we have the right parameters for this, I can certainly understand not having the support of landlords. And yet I do favor moving ahead with considering and asking council to consider some of these tenant favorable changes to the MHRSO. And the details of that, I look forward to our discussion this evening. I think the MNOI calculation is quite an important safety valve to the landlords and in some ways a risk to tenants. So because we're regulating the net operating income of landlords, and because of the state law saying we need to have a fair rate of return, landlords currently and ongoingly have the ability to petition if they can prove that their revenue growth minus their expense growth not only isn't the same, but it also, they can ask for higher space rents if it hasn't grown by inflation. So when if we tonight choose to make some changes that are reducing the AGA, for example, we run more risk, and the Mountain View mobile home residents run more risk of landlords petitioning that they are not making an acceptable profit. But I have more to say. I'll end my comments here and say, so one of the things that the Rental Housing Committee tonight with our recommendations and the council in their decisions will need to consider is how is the risk of MNOI petitions changing, and is that a risk worth considering? So those are enough comments for now.
All right, Member Cox.
Yeah, I think since I've been here, the two big issues that we've had to talk about are RUBS and this. And I think that for me, RUBS was actually the easier of the two because it was really just a question of looking at the CSFRA and seeing what it said and seeing whether staff came back and their interpretation of it is the way, we would read it, and we were pretty much unanimous that staff had read it right. So this is tougher because this is a question of both economics and values. And so one thing I'm glad about being retired is I had more time to think about this in detail and go through and do some scenarios in my mind. But, I want to say for my initial comments, I appreciate the fact that when we get down to the fundamentals, the Mobile Home Rent Stabilization Ordinance has two main goals. The first is the tenant goal, where we protect the home residents from unreasonable rent increases. And the second one is the landlord goal, protecting the right of the park owners and mobile home landlords to receive a fair rate of return on their property and rental income sufficient to cover increases in costs of repairs, maintenance, insurance, employee services, additional amenities, and other costs of operation. And so from my own perspective, those being the overriding goals of the ordinance, if they're not both being met, we're not doing something right. Okay, and so, I appreciate I appreciate what Committee Member Keating said, that, you know, we do have the MNOI petition process as a, I would call it as a last-ditch safeguard against, you know, the landlord protection not being met. And so that's a good thing. But on the other hand, as she also pointed out, you know, if every year, you know, the landlord mobile home park owners end up submitting one, I mean, it kind of negates out the whole idea of the protection that comes from the AGA. So, you know, the next thing I'll say is, so what does this look like on the surface? And don't jump to conclusions when I say, because I'm really saying on the surface. Okay, because on the surface, you look at it and you say, okay, having an AGA of 100%, let's inflation be tracked. And so that means that, you know, since the landlords can increase the rent based on inflation, it means that, you know, the increases aren't unreasonable because they actually track inflation. You know, on the other hand, there could be other things that enter into the whole questioning about what plays into a fair rate of return. So, for example, you know, there's vacancy decontrol. And so if there is turnover, it could be that the landlords can still get a fair rate of return, even if they don't get the full AGI. But we don't have the facts to determine whether that's the case. And I mean, you know, we've tracked what's gone on with the CSFRA, with vacancies, with you know, how many new units are coming on board in various categories and stuff like that. And I haven't seen, I asked some questions, a lot of them, and I apologize for staff that I put 7 of them up to you before this, but the reason that's there is we just don't have the same data that has been given to us as members of the committee about the mobile home park owner's situation relative to what the apartment owner's situation is. And I have some big questions that I would feel I'd need answered to be able to make an intelligent answer about what the right way to go on this is. So let me name a few of them. One of them is we've heard a lot about displacement tonight, okay? But, you know, I mean, you know, displacement's never zero. I mean, I see displacement in my own neighborhood, sometimes because of choice, because as people reach the point in life like I am as a senior, they often ask themselves, well, since I don't need to stay here for my job, is it really in my best interest to stick around, okay? And I lost some of my best friends that way because they felt that it wasn't, okay? But that's a choice. What I really'd like to know is there a higher degree of displacement in the mobile home parks than there is in the apartment buildings, the way things are now, because we're using the same AGA formula. So what's different about the apartment buildings? One thing I heard from testimony tonight is that, you know, that I knew this, that the mobile home rent stabilization ordinance was passed 6 years later, okay? And so one question I have is, you know, I guess I'll just ask staff this one right out. Was there any rollback provision in the, and there was? Okay, and how far back did it go?
At the time the MHRSO was adopted, the rollback date was back to March 2021.
So how many months back was it?
That was when it was adopted in October. That's about 6 months.
Okay, so it sounds like it was similar, okay, to what happened with the CSFRA, or no?
The CSFRA was over a year.
Okay, so it's not as much, okay? And also, one thing I wonder about in that 6-year period, okay, is whether or not the rents had been allowed to increase over unreasonable levels during that period, and so whether or not a larger rollback would have been justified. So
I think what we saw in those 6 years, not that the rent for existing tenants was increased within a subordinate amount of money, but for new tenancies that came on board, the initial price went up considerably.
Okay, but like if a person, for instance, came into the mobile home park at the time when the CSFRA was adopted, okay, and then, You know, I mean, and then at the point where the MHRSO is adopted, I mean, would the rent increases that person had gotten over the years because there was no stabilization
Yeah.
would have been higher than the AGA,
Yeah,
right?
I also wanted to point out that the mobile homes do have vacancy control for the spaces.
Oh, they have vacancy
Yeah,
control.
so if that were to be in place since 2016, the initial rents would have been limited to what the current rent was plus 100% CPI. So there was a limitation to what new initial rents could have been.
But it still could have been the case that if a person came in during that 6-year period where there was a CSFRA, but not the mobile home rent stabilization ordinance, that their rents would have gone up, that person's rents would have gone up higher than the AGA, right? And, you know, for the consideration of whether the rents got to an unacceptably high level, you know, that's data I would have wanted to see. So I'm commenting back on what our speaker had said. She said that her rent right now was at $22.61 and 71? $22.71. I mean, okay, and if I compare that against, you know, what we saw, you know, with the typical average rent in the rent-controlled units, which is about $2,500, it means that they're quite close. Okay, only a few hundred off, and so, you know, it means that the situations may not be comparable. So that's something I would have liked more data on. So another thing is on the other side of it, do rising utility and labor costs put a greater pressure? You know, because I mean, they're rising faster than inflation. And so then the question comes up is that, you know, I mean, are we reaching a point where, it becomes less sustainable for the owners? On the other hand, what is the rate of return on the investment the landlords are making now in the mobile home parks, and how does that compare against what people in apartments are making? You know, all of those things, I really feel it would be great if you could give the council some information like that, because that would help them compare and contrast the two situations and to see where, you know, it seems we are hearing, and it may just be because the council has the purview to do it more easily, but we're hearing a larger outcry from the people in the mobile home parks than we are from the people who are living in apartments right now. And that's what I would like to know about. So anyway, those are my initial questions. I guess the thing about it is that I don't know whether I believe that changing the AGI is the right answer. I do wonder what, you know, some other things are we using the wrong AGI? I mean, should we be using something like the Social Security Index, which is lower, that might reflect things better? Should we be using something that more closely reflects the mobile homeowner's costs? And did we really deal enough with the rollback? And should some formula dealing with that be a better way to deal with it because there was such a delay? So anyway, those are my questions and my thoughts. At this point, I'm uncomfortable in just moving ahead and supporting the staff recommendation, because the one thing I hear is neither the tenants nor the landlords like it. So anyway, those are my initial thoughts. I want to hear what the rest of you have to say.
Okay, I can speak. I'll first ask staff a procedure question. For a motion, do we need unanimity or do we need a majority of non-recused members?
A majority.
So 2 is majority in this context. Okay, just to be clear. I will give, as Edie remarked on the general process, my general comments. I do not treat mobile home space rent as a kind of same thing as an apartment rent. For one, a mobile home owner needs to both pay space rent as well as the mortgage because they own the building outright. They're just owning a lease on the land. So in a way, it's kind of more coinciding to like a condo relationship where instead of an HOA fee, you pay space rent for the, general maintenance of common area. Obviously, the main difference here is in a condo, the HOA is voted by the homeowners, whereas in a mobile home park, it's the mobile home park owner. So it's when we talk about things like 2000, we do not do them one-to-one with a person who happens to be renting a two-bedroom at 2,000. That's because in that case, you don't actually have a mortgage, you don't have to pay your insurance or for those purposes. I would mention, as remarked from the PowerPoint presentation, that there are a lot of people on Social Security, and Social Security for a long time, recent years have been an aberration just because the general economic situation was an aberration, but for a long time it was very low. It's like somewhere around, there was a point in 2017 where it was actually 0.3%, which is quite low. As such, I would be interested to see potentially adjustments to be made in favor of those who are otherwise don't really have the income they can generate to be able to reach the new rent targets based on what the AGA currently provides them. As mentioned by my fellow committee members, we do have an option if the landlord does face a situation where they literally are kind of going broke on a project. We have the MNOI petition process, which I would note that for the MNOI, when we use the fair rate of return standard based on unadjusted NOI, adjusted net operating income, we explicitly say that then that thing can go up or down depending on the inflation rate. If the inflation rate for some reason was negative, then that adjusted MNOI actually decreases year to year. Whereas in this current situation with the 2%, it is a fixed monotonically increasing amount. As mentioned from others, obviously, if the mobile home park owner does want to provide greater services to their residents, we do have a joint petition process, which does allow a negotiation to be done between the tenants or the mobile home owners and the mobile home park owner on determining whether it is actually a mutually beneficial agreement on whether there should be additional benefits or improvements. So I feel like we do have other processes to address some of these things and could be more explored in this discussion. All right, in that case, Member Keating, do you want us to move to the individual components, or is there something else you would like to switch to?
I'd like to add a few more general comments before we move to the individual. One is just to add a little nuance around vacancy control or decontrol at the mobile home parks. So my understanding is that when there's a new owner of the mobile home, that the space rent can be increased, but only by the AGA, by one AGA. And so there's some ability to, some vacancy, decontrol or, increase in the space rent, but it's not that great. And so that part of the reality makes it more possible that an MNOI petition would succeed. There's less vacancy control, increasing the landlord operating income when there's turnover than there is in apartments. But there are a significant number of fully rented mobile homes that are owned by the park owner, at least in two, I guess only in two of the mobile homes at Santiago Villa and at Sahara. And those have full vacancy decontrol. So when someone moves out there, the park owner who is the renting, not just the space, but the unit, can set the new rent. And so that will help increase the park owner profit when there's turnover and avoid MNOI. I think one more general comment, kind of echoing some of other comments. I think in 2021, when the mobile home rent stabilization ordinance was passed, that we may have been in a situation of a higher percent of residents who were didn't have room in their budgets for very many escalations, and who were, and yet, I am persuaded by the comments we've heard from mobile home residents that they have a sunk cost in their mortgage and in their investment in their home, and so they are in many ways less mobile than apartment renters. Thank you. So now I'd be happy if we moved on to some of, oh, go ahead.
Okay, you're calling on me? Okay, fine. Yeah, I think I want to thank you for the second bite of the apple then. So here, let me ask you this. We talked about the idea in the staff report that like in some mobile home parks, like 44% of the residents were seniors, okay? When it comes to setting the measure that's used for the AGI, does the council have the right to use a different AGI for those who are seniors and those who are not?
I think we'd have to really look at that question and determine whether there is a basis for doing that without running afoul of some discrimination laws.
Okay, because the reason I'm asking it is because, I mean, if it's looking like, you know, that seniors trying to stay in their mobile homes are facing, you know, particular difficulties because they're not getting an increase in their Social Security payments that match the AGI because the measures are different, then, I mean, you know, one question is, well, can we make for those people who are seniors, okay, I mean, you know, a different measure so that this tracks things differently? Or another way to do it would be, you know, to set the AGI at the minimum of the Social Security and the AGI for the Bay Area. I mean, I've been a little bit befuddled by the idea. As I look at the economic data, you know, what I see happening in here in the Bay Area is that the cost of living since the CSF area was passed is substantially higher in inflation than in other parts of the country. And so, I mean, you know, in terms of trying to wrap my head around, you know, what it is about that, you know, I mean, like, you know, the federal government is going to take, you know, the national rate of inflation and give us, you know, our Social Security based on that. And so, you know, it doesn't help when somebody's trying to stay in his home here. And, you know, I mean, he has a local inflation rate that's much higher. So that's something I'd like to know, but I appreciate the concerns that you have there. And I guess just finally, before we go into the individual items, I guess I'm not comfortable with the idea of not having an AGI that in no way tracks inflation. But I think that there might be a way to adjust it by using the right measure to make it more tenable to people in the special circumstances. So anyway, those are my thoughts.
All right. In that case, we will move on to discussing the individual components. We will start with the actual AGA itself. Does anyone have any comments on the AGA, what it should be portion? Member Cox?
Yeah, my recommendation would be to change it to the minimum of the Social Security AGA and the Bay Area AGA.
When you say the Bay Area AGA, do you mean the Bay Area CPI?
Yes, sorry, the Bay Area CPI.
And 100% of the CPI?
100%, yeah.
And may I ask a clarification? The lower of the two.
The lower of the two, yeah.
Committee Member Keaton?
It's an interesting idea. I mean, you were, you know, speaking to the Social Security COLA is a national number. And So I have some reservation about incorporating that into our Bay Area numbers. But it certainly would, or at least I expect it would reduce, provide some lower AGAs. So I'm not totally opposed to that, but I think I'm more inclined to mimic other jurisdictions, that have found other ways to lower AGA. And so one is the staff recommendation of 75% of the AGA. And I'm also somewhat persuaded by the tenant, or the many mobile home residents who have said 60% of the CPI. And part of why I'm persuaded to try that is that the MNOI gives the opportunity, if it really is a hardship on the landlords, for them to petition. And, what are some reasons I think that won't happen all the time? I think that landlords may be making a significant profit and may choose to not lay all of that information out and just accept a slightly lower rate of growth in their profit. And it may take years before they decide that that their decrease in profit growth is sufficient, that they choose to do an MNOI petition. So I'm willing to, and also the true rental units may have vacancy decontrol and also help deter the MNOI. So I am interested in either 60% or 75%, leaning towards 60% of the AGA as a way of CPI, rather, as a way to moderate the AGA.
Okay, I have a question to our legal counsel. What kind of findings do we need to make, or if counsel decides to take any of these numbers, the difference between 60% or 75%?
Well, you're only making a recommendation.
I'm aware.
So, for the council can, I'm not sure that there really are any specific findings, but they can look at the overall costs. The reason why jurisdictions don't use 100% of CPI is because not all landlords' costs or park owners' costs fluctuate with inflation. Some of the costs are fixed. So the various percentages are an effort to address the costs that do fluctuate with inflation. And there's various studies out there as to what the range is for those costs.
Okay, because I've heard from others that, the reason it's 60 or 75% is those are meant to be the amount of things in what's calculated in CPI minus the housing components. Is that correct, or?
Not exactly. The primary premise for using less than 100% of CPI is that one of the largest costs of a rental property owner is their debt service, their mortgage.
Okay.
And the mortgage doesn't fluctuate necessarily with inflation, but also that contributes to their equity. So when you're looking at the costs that do fluctuate with inflation, you take out the mortgage, and that's going to mean less than 100% of your costs fluctuate. That's why I say it varies, the different ranges, as you saw in the staff report. There are different studies about what the norm is as to what costs actually do fluctuate.
Okay. Member Cox?
Yes. I think that's very valuable information, and I wish it had been in the staff report. The key thing is, there's a couple things. So I highly recommend that when you make up the staff report, you try to give a justification for why a lower AGA could be sustainable for the landlord, so that it won't just be a transfer of wealth from the landlords to the mobile home owners. right? Because we've seen from the staff report that, yeah, if you reduce the rents, the value of the mobile homes goes up. And so, I mean, so it could lead somebody to ask the question, well, is it just a transfer of wealth from the park owner to the homeowner, right? Okay, and so maybe not everybody would find that justifiable. But I mean, if there's a real strong case you can make and basis that you can make that shows that, I mean, as that there's a better measure to show how their costs are rising over time than the inflation rate, then I think you can make a better case. But I just didn't see that laid out, and I'm not a mobile home inflation expert. I just find the data on my own. So, yeah.
Thank you for the comment. I just wanted to know, all of these are really reasonable questions, and they make sense in having the data. What we've observed and what we've seen is these types of studies are typically quite comprehensive and take time to gather and put it together. And so, you know, part of it was just the ability to gather that sort of information, maybe talk to jurisdictions, try to gather economic analysis, and likely we would have probably need a consultant to help us do a much more comprehensive study to actually get some numbers behind it. But it does make sense to articulate the concept, but it's not necessarily that we would be able to have generated the data and do the analysis to include it in the time frame. But the questions make sense, and the data needs would make sense.
I guess the other thing is that, you know, I mean, I heard what the tenant commentator said about, you know, other jurisdictions and how they have these lower numbers, and also it's in the staff report. But, you know, I mean, another comment that they made that also raises an issue for me is that when I think of Antioch and Richmond and these other places like that, I really do believe Mountain View's situation is not totally reflective of what went on in those communities. We're here in the Bay Area, right? I mean, in the heart of it. And I mean, we experienced the whiplash that happened before COVID, you know, in terms of, you know, the vicious unaffordability that went through for people, and I don't believe it was the same in those other places. They're further out, and so it wasn't as extreme. And so, I mean, it might not be quite right to generalize simply from their circumstance to our own. If we, you know, if we had other jurisdictions in the area with mobile home rent control, like, you know, I mean, like, let's just say if it happened in Palo Alto or Sunnyvale, you know, I mean, you know, then, I mean, it might have hit a little bit closer to home in terms of the analogy. But I mean, it's just not clear to me we have an apples to apples comparison here. So anyway, let's get back to business.
Okay, I guess I'll speak. So my concerns with SSI were kind of implied from our legal counsel is that there would require a look at fair housing issues. I feel like it's a little bit weird to set different rent increases purely based off of whether a person is of a certain age, because like there's obviously like there's different definitions of seniors, right? One definition for the city is 55 and years and older, but you get Social Security that's definitely over 60. So it's a little bit. I mean that also requires some like. We also want to avoid the situation where we might discriminate against watching. No, you can't discriminate because the sale of a mobile home is based on the owner, not the park owner. As such, I also feel like a minimum of SSI and the Bay Area CPI is a little bit odd. It is true that we do want its balance between landlords making sure they are able to track with economic conditions so that they are maintaining the park afloat. So keeping to SSI, which I did mention previously, there was cases where it was quite low compared to our CPI in the area. In 2017, COLA was 0.3 versus our overall CPI was 3.4. So it's a little bit hard to square that. But I could be persuaded perhaps given the high amount of people on fixed incomes in the property. As such, I'm more aligned with Member Keating with keeping what other jurisdictions do in this area, which for the most part is based on of a CPI, just like we do for general rent control. And I am still debating about, from the commenters, from what we heard from the public, whether a 60% is preferable over a 75%, but we can probably go for another round of comments to determine that.
One option would be we could recommend two different, or a range where council should consider.
Question to staff, is that an acceptable item to be put in a motion as a range rather than a specific number?
Well, we can certainly reflect that that is the comments from the Rental Housing Committee. I think we'll have to go back and think about how we would help make the city council make a decision, or how they would deliberate between 60 and 75%. We probably won't have enough of the data to say it should be this or that, but we can certainly understand that there are concepts that suggest maybe it should be lower or higher. And so I think we'll have to, what we would do is we would take your comment, reflect it, and think about how we can describe it and provide some information for the council to deliberate between either the range or one of the two options.
Yeah, because obviously, when we're doing comparisons with the jurisdictions we've chosen, roughly 50% of the jurisdictions are at 70 or below, and we're at the other half. So it's a difficult decision to make. It is also mentioned that obviously, from the history of the situation was that the CSFOA went through first. We did this whole rigmarole of whether a past RC thought it was covering mobile home parks and it wasn't, and it became the RSO. So I do lend some credence that over that time, people probably saw the writing on the wall that there was likely some rent stabilization going to happen in the future, and may have preemptively started raising rates in case for that. I was looking at past letters from that original MHRSO discussion, and we even had a letter from the now departing Congresswoman about some complaints she's heard from mobile home park, from mobile home owners about whether their park was going to actually just make their lives perhaps more difficult if such a thing were to be heard. Like, we have heard of people who have said stories that their mobile home park owner literally told them that we will always set it as high as possible because of some kind of retaliation discussion. So, yeah. Any other discussion? Okay, we can revisit this at the end. Moving on to floor. Any discussion on the floor? Member Keating?
Sometimes Social Security is zero. Sometimes Consumer Price Index is zero. And so I think that there should not be a floor. I think the floor should be zero.
Okay. I too agree with that, mentioning from the MNOI discussion that our MNOI for adjusted net operating income, it doesn't have to go up every year. And we explicitly write the wording is it can increase or decrease based off of that particular year's inflation rates. So I too think that we could, that the floor should probably not be set in alignment with a lot of the other jurisdictions in the area. Do you have any thoughts on this?
Sorry, I had to run out. Can you tell me what you guys both said?
Setting no floor.
Okay. Yeah, no comment at this time.
Okay. Moving on then to ceiling. Do we have any discussions on ceiling? Member Keating?
This is the one component where I'm the most ambivalent.
Let's see. My comments are, so our ceiling is On the lower half of our peers, just under the 50th percentile. As we mentioned, so it is true that if we change the AGA to be a percentage of CPI rather than full CPI, that the likelihood of hitting the 5% is lower, just given that to hit the cap as it was, again, an economic aberration. So I too am ambivalent about whether the cap itself should be reduced at this time. Member Cox?
I don't favor changing the cap.
Okay, then. Okay. So we have two parts of a motion that we clearly show agreement on. It's the AGA portion that is less clear. Member Keating?
Should we do some motions item by item? I mean, I think we have one that we can pass. About the floor.
I think at this point we are able to have a full motion, and if anyone has objections to any single portion, we can make that either into subsidiary motions. Okay. So in that case, a motion can be made now, if anyone would like to make a motion. Member Keating?
I move no floor, 60%, 5%.
You want to press the button? I will second for the purposes of discussion, just because we have a motion on the floor at first. All right, any discussion on the motion? In that case, we will go for a vote then? Unless they...
Ambivalence is coming in. I would like to hear my committee members' comments on if instead of the motion on the floor, it was amended to be 4%.
That the ceiling be reduced
Yes.
from 5 to 4?
That was the Measure D amount.
Yeah, but that didn't pass, so which you can make of any kind of argument of the validity of a vote that didn't go how it failed. I think for now, I will not accept that amendment. Again, right, we're just making the argument that if we now change to 60% CPI, that's much harder to reach the 5% cap.
That's persuasive.
I guess it really depends on what. Can someone calculate what the inflation rate would need to be to reach a 4% cap with 60% CPI? Sure.
That'd be just over 8%.
What?
Just over 8%.
8%. So, yeah, I don't feel like we're going to see. I hope we won't see 8% inflation anytime soon. Fingers crossed here. So, I think for now, especially given the fact we're kind of all sitting behind the fact that this is just a recommendation to council, that council has final determination on what goes. So I guess I would not accept that amendment.
So I am persuaded by your arguments that no floor 60%, 5% is a motion we should be considering.
All right, Member Cox? Or did you just have it from before? Nothing to say. In that case, with no further discussion, we'll move on to the vote. Motion passes. All right. And in that case, Thank you, committee members and staff, for that discussion. I guess we need to find our recused members to call them back. Yeah, we'll take a 5-minute break to find them.
For clarity, the motion passes 2 votes yes with 1 vote abstain. All right. The Rental Housing Committee meeting has resumed.
Welcome back, everybody. Thanks for holding it down while I was recused, Vice Chair. So we are going to get to item 7, which is committee staff announcements and updates. I'll hand it back to staff for some presentations.
Thank you. And before I give the presentation on agenda item 7.1, I do want to correct my telling of the vote for item 6.1. It was 2 yeses and 1 no. I apologize for the mistake earlier. And 2 recused. Okay. Thank you. Agenda item 7.1, upcoming workshops and help center dates. All right. As usual, we are continuing our virtual office hours every Tuesday from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. These are online only. People can register at the website here on the screen. In addition to that, we have upcoming workshops. The next one is next Thursday, December 19th at 2 p.m. This is landlord focused, and it's the start of our series on property owner registration and annual fees. And then coming into the new year, starting January 9th, we will have another landlord focused workshop about submitting the utility adjustment petition. And also on the 9th, we will have a tenant-focused hybrid workshop at the community center and online, going over evictions and eviction protections. And also we do continue to hold our housing help centers. We have our landlord-specific help centers that we are continuing to hold every Thursday for the time being, to make extra time for people who are registering and for those who are filling out their utility adjustment petitions. These are both in person and on Zoom. And while those are the 2 topics that we are focusing on, of course, landlords can come for any number of topics, like compliance, any other types of petitions or eviction questions. And we are also continuing our tenant-specific housing help centers. These are still the first and third Thursday of every month from 2 to 6 p.m. They are also hybrid, so in person and online. People come for information about housing programs, eviction help, legal resources, rental assistance, and other types of supportive services. And I would also like to mention that our help centers are going to be closed for the first Thursday of the month due to New Year's holiday and the majority of staff being off-site. Any questions?
Any questions in the committee? No questions. No.
Thank you.
Then it's my turn to announce the expected future agenda items for RHC meetings. So in the new year, first meeting, January 23rd, we're going to have appeals, potentially including the one that would have been held tonight.
Yes, I think we have 2 appeals.
Including the one from tonight?
Yes, we already had one.
Mm-hmm.
So now we will have 2.
Likely have 2 appeals. We'll also have the annual overview for our staff's outreach and education efforts, which I'm excited about. We do good work. And then update on legislation and case law. So are there any additional comments, announcements from committee members or city staff? Talk about the tree lighting? No? You want to brag about the tree lighting? No? Okay. I thought it was cool. Vice Chair? Okay. Rosas?
Yes. So I wanna, if we don't get to see each other, I wanted to mention everybody on TV watching us, happy holidays and Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. And to staff, thank you so much for all the work that you have done all throughout the year. I know we definitely have worked you a lot, so we do really appreciate how you serve the community. Thank you.
Hear, hear. All right. Well, the meeting is adjourned at 9:11 p.m. Next Rental Housing Committee meeting is scheduled to be held on Thursday, January 23rd at 7 p.m. Thanks, everybody.